Every generation believes it is free, until it slowly realizes it was born inside someone else's balance sheet. We are taught that freedom means choice. But in the modern world, every choice has a credit limit attached to it. You do not truly own your home, the bank does. You do not fully own your education, the lender does. You do not even fully own your time, because the debt clock is always running in the background. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a system. It is a quiet empire, not ruled by kings, flags, or armies, but by contracts, credit agreements, and compound interest. It has no borders and no anthem. Yet it influences almost every major decision you make. This is the empire of debt. The only empire that never sleeps, never bleeds, and never stops growing. Stay until the end, because once you see how deep this system reaches, you will understand why history keeps repeating the same silent collapse again and again. This story does not begin with soldiers or revolutions, but with something far more powerful, a signature. In the 20th century, the world learned that money could be created not only by printing presses, but by promises. When a bank gives you a loan, it does not hand you someone else's saved money. It creates new money with a few keystrokes. Your debt becomes the system's profit. That is how the modern financial empire was born, not through invasion, but through agreements written in ink. After the Second World War, most nations were exhausted. Cities were ruined, industries shattered, lives broken. To restart the engine of growth, banks began lending on an unprecedented scale. Credit cards, home loans, car financing, education debt. Each one was a new method of pulling the future into the present. For a time, it worked remarkably well. Consumption exploded. Families bought houses. Corporations expanded. Debt became the oxygen of prosperity. But like oxygen, too much of it turns toxic. The 1980s marked the true rise of this new empire, when money stopped being about what you earned and became about what you could borrow. Leaders promised liberation through deregulation and free markets. What they delivered was leverage. Banks were unleashed. Credit limits stretched endlessly. And the wealthy discovered a new weapon: financial engineering. Companies realized they no longer needed innovation to grow. They could borrow, issue bonds, buy back their own shares, and inflate stock prices. The system rewarded speed and punished patience. This was the financialization of everything, the moment money stopped representing work and started multiplying itself. By the 1990s, debt had become invisible, woven into daily life. Governments learned they could run deficits without immediate pain. Corporations learned they could load their balance sheets with borrowed billions and still call it success. People learned to measure progress by how much they could access, not how much they owned. Student loans replaced opportunity. Mortgages replaced ownership. Credit scores replaced character. The empire did not conquer you. It persuaded you. It convinced you that unlimited credit was freedom. But true freedom ends where interest begins. The early 2000s introduced the next mutation: the age of derivatives. Debt was no longer just borrowed. It was packaged, sliced, sold, and resold. Wall Street turned obligation into a tradable product. Mortgage-backed securities, credit default swaps, layered debt structures. It became a global casino built on promises, and for a while, everyone thought they were winning. Then came the financial collapse of 2008, a global heart attack. It should have ended the system. Instead, it rebirthed it. Governments rescued the gamblers, created money to save the reckless, and told ordinary people to tighten their belts. Losses were shared by society. Profits remained private. That was the moment the empire of debt stopped, pretending it served the public, and revealed that it fed on them. After that crisis, the world entered what economists politely call the era of low interest. In reality, it was the era of no consequences. Debt became cheap. Money felt endless. The empire expanded faster than ever. Corporations borrowed trillions to repurchase their own shares. Governments borrowed to fund promises they could never truly pay for. Consumers borrowed simply to survive wages that stood still. It was the appearance of stability, a fragile illusion built entirely on credit. Every salary, every purchase, every policy decision became another link in the chain. And the more comfortable life seemed, the weaker the foundation became. Then came the year 2020. A perfect storm. A global pandemic. Supply chains froze. economies stopped. In a matter of months, governments created more money than in the entire previous century combined. Trillions appeared from nothing. Stimulus, relief, support, different labels for the same dependency. Debt was no longer the problem. It was declared the solution to everything. Businesses were rescued. Markets soared, yet ordinary people grew poorer, because the real crisis was never the virus. It was the reflection, staring back at us. When production halted, we saw how little was tangible, how much of the global economy was simply numbers on screens, debt disguised as wealth. But empires do not stop when exposed. They evolve. Today, the empire of debt is transforming into something even more powerful: digital debt. Central banks are building digital currencies, programmable money. Every transaction can be tracked. Every credit line can be adjusted. Every limit can be enforced. On the surface, it is called efficiency. In reality, it is control. Because when money becomes code, debt becomes data, and data is the most powerful tool any empire has ever possessed. And whoever owns the data owns the empire. What once looked like freedom through credit is quietly transforming into surveillance through currency. Accounts can be frozen. Access can be restricted. Digital wallets can be programmed to reward obedience and punish deviation. This is not science fiction. It is financial architecture. The empire is rewriting itself in code. Yet, here is the irony. For all its algorithms and complexity, the empire of debt still rests on one ancient foundation: trust. Trust that your paycheck will buy tomorrow what it buys today. Trust that governments will not quietly erase your savings. Trust that there will always be a buyer for the next $1 trillion of debt. That fragile belief is all that holds the system together. And belief can crack. We saw that crack widen in 2022 when inflation surged across the world. Ordinary people began to realize their money was evaporating faster than they could earn it. For the first time in decades, the empire's magic was visible and frightening. And what did leaders do? They blamed supply chains, wars, weather, anything except the truth. That the system survives by slowly devaluing you. Inflation is not an accident. It is the tax that requires no vote. It is how the empire sustains itself, quietly transferring value from workers, savers, and retirees to debtors and institutions. And when inflation becomes unbearable, the response is always the same: more debt. We are trapped in a feedback loop, creating money to solve problems caused by creating money. This is not capitalism, it is credit. And like every addiction, it ends in withdrawal. So where does it lead? The empire faces three paths, none without pain. The first is controlled decay, a slow erosion through inflation, regulation, and quiet restructuring. The wealthy remain protected. The middle class fades. The second is digital control, a reset through central bank digital currencies, with new rules, total traceability, and vanishing privacy. The third is a return to reality, a shift toward tangible assets, decentralized systems, and alternative stores of value: gold, commodities, crypto, skills, production. Different forms, same instinct. Every path ends the same way: a transfer of power. When debt grows too large to repay, the empire does not fail. It changes the rules. Those who understand the game do not disappear. They adapt. They hold what cannot be printed. They build value that survives inflation, manipulation, and fear. History shows this pattern clearly. Every financial collapse transfers power from those who trust blindly to those who question early. What follows is not always chaos. It is often clarity, a movement from paper wealth to real wealth, from illusion to substance, from borrowers to builders. We were taught that debt is normal, that it is progress, that it is growth, but debt does not build civilizations. Discipline does, production does, trust does. When a society stops creating and starts borrowing, its future is already spent. That is why the empire of debt feels invisible. It lives inside us. In our education, our ambitions, our consumption, all financed by promises that cannot be kept. No one forced us. We volunteered. We traded ownership for convenience, patience for speed, reality for credit. Now the bill is coming due. Every empire falls the same way. Not by losing strength, but by losing trust. The empire of debt is no different. It will not collapse in battle. It will collapse in confidence. You will hear it first in markets, then in banks, then in daily life. Numbers will still appear on screens, but belief in those numbers will fade. That moment is what every empire fears, when belief dies before currency does. And yet, within collapse lies something rare: truth. The realization that value never lived in paper, plastic, or pixels, but in what people can create, build, and exchange freely. When illusion burns away, truth remains, and truth is always the foundation of the next system. History does not end with collapse. It resets, it clears the ledger, and each time it does, those who understand how money truly works rise again. The empire of debt was never really about banks or governments. It was about belief. And that belief is breaking. As the world approaches its next reset, remember this: the future will not belong to those with the most credit, but to those with the most clarity. The empire of debt is already cracking. The only question is whether you will be paying the interest or helping write what comes next. Because the answers are not hidden in the future. They are written in the past.